You can't manage what you're not measuring. You can make a difference in your own health if you know where there's opportunity. You have the power to make an impact on your numbers.
So I'm here with Dr. Daphne Bascom, and this is an episode for our podcast, the Vegan Gym Podcast. But we thought that this conversation was so important that we wanted to share it on YouTube as well. So Daphne, would you just give a quick little background as to who you are and what we're going to be talking about today?
Absolutely. Thanks, Leif. So I am Chief Operating Officer at the Vegan Gym and one of the health coaches. I am a physician by background. I trained as an otolaryngologist, head and neck surgeon, spent years working on helping people who had head and neck cancer, and transitioned into a career where I actually help people prevent disease, and now focus all of my time and effort on lifestyle medicine and lifestyle wellness.
Awesome. So we've got a really important conversation in store today. This is something that is especially meaningful to you. So what are we going to be talking about today, and what can viewers expect to get from this conversation?
Today, we're going to be talking about data. And it's hard to tell how healthy you are simply by looking at yourself. You know, how you look externally, stepping on the scale, those may be good indicators, but looking at your health from the perspective of what are your biomarkers, there's a sensitivity and specificity there that can it can open up a window into what's going on with you from a metabolic perspective, from a general health perspective. So today we're going to talk about what are some basic recommendations we have in order to allow you to understand what is your baseline state of health.
Awesome. Yeah, and the foundation of this whole conversation, as you touched on, is know your numbers, know your health data, and also track that over time. If you don't know these numbers, then you can't really make an informed decision. So we are going to be specifically focusing on blood testing today, but yeah, just in general, knowing your health data is a really important ally in your health and fitness journey.
Absolutely. It's a mantra that I use all the time because you can't manage what you're not measuring. So avoidance doesn't help you navigate your health. And now that a lot of the data is democratized, meaning you don't necessarily have to wait for a physician to order some of the tests we'll talk about, you have access to better understanding your numbers.
Yeah, great. So let's dive right in. And I'd love to start by just asking you, should I get a blood test? Who should get a blood test? And when should you be getting blood tests done?
Okay, this is a great question. So I want to start by saying, one, we're going to be talking in a very generic perspective. I don't know for everyone who's listening, what is your current health status? Do you have any pre-existing conditions that you are currently navigating? Under the umbrella of know your numbers, if you've never had a blood test, if you're an adult over the age of 18 and you've never had a comprehensive metabolic assessment, you should know where your numbers are today. And it's important because, again, especially with the rise of cardiac and metabolic disease in our youth, we're finding that more and more people of a younger age are manifesting type 2 diabetes, early cardiovascular disease. And there may be indicators that you can make changes in lifestyle and reverse these diseases if you know sooner. So don't wait until you're in your 40s or in your 50s, because a lot of us think, I feel healthy, but knowing your numbers is important. So to answer your question directly, if you are an adult over the age of 18 and you are engaged in the healthcare system, or you have access to getting a basic set of labs done that may be an expense out of pocket, you should have your baseline assessment completed.
Yeah, I first started getting much more serious about this just in the last few months, and it is really empowering to know your numbers and be able to track those over time. And I think probably at the back of everyone's or most people's minds, they're wondering, am I really healthy? Is there anything kind of going wrong? Are there any potential underlying issues that I should be aware of? And even if that's not something that's always top of mind, just kind of that, kind of having that low frequency kind of hum at the back of your mind, wondering, am I actually healthy? I think is something that lots of people deal with. So just knowing where you're at is really empowering.
It is. And I want to actually step back for 1 second, because there are U.S. Preventive Service Task Force recommendations for if you go into a physician's office, they'll open up their EMR. There will be standard recommendations for screening examinations that most Americans will have access to. They're not all blood tests, but many of them are predicated on based on your gender, based on your age, based on your past medical history or family history. There may be core recommendations that your provider's already talking to you about. What we want to do today is talk about Lab Test 101. This isn't going to be a deep dive into the nuances of every test, but if you're looking at understanding at a foundational level, am I healthy? This is what we want to explore. And then I'd love to come back and have a deeper conversation on some of these numbers.
Wonderful. Well, let's dive right in. So, yeah, I think maybe the best place to get started is just to understand what tests should I be getting. If I'm going to get my blood testing done for the first time, or maybe the first time in a while, what tests should I kind of be prioritizing, and what should I be looking for?
So I'm going to break them up into some broad categories. I'll say first, there's a set of general labs that you should think about. And that's going to be things like your complete blood count, your CBC, and a comprehensive metabolic panel, or your CMP. So your CBC looks at your blood cells, your red blood cells, your white blood cells, your platelets. A CMP looks at things like your sodium, your potassium, your chloride, all your electrolytes. Those are some basic general labs that would be included in that initial assessment. And you can get those at any LabQuest, LabCorp, Inside Tracker. They're all available there. The next level up would be looking at some more specific tests, and that is going to be looking at your lipid profile, but it would be a lipid profile plus. And I would include, as part of that lipid profile, an ApoB test and a lipoprotein little a test. And we can talk more in detail about those in an additional episode, since this is Blood Test 101. But your CBC, your CMP, and your lipid profile should be top of mind for you, just to have what is my cardiometabolic health as a baseline. And that CMP, you may need to add onto that test, if it's not included, a fasting blood glucose, so the blood sugar level, and then also your hemoglobin A1C, which is a more of an average of what your blood sugar has been over about 90 days.
So that's a really helpful kind of start to this conversation in terms of what blood tests I should be getting. What about any kind of micronutrient deficiencies? If I'm worried about that and I've been following a plant-based diet for a few months, few years, and would like to understand how my micronutrient levels have been changing, or ensuring that I'm getting the adequate nutrition in my diet, is that something that people should really prioritize? And at what point do you maybe prioritize that in your plant-based journey?
I'm going to talk both in your plant-based journey and if you're not plant-based. So I do want to make sure that we're talking to most people. One, because I hope everyone adds more plants to their plate, but a lot of these recommendations apply to vegans, but also they apply to non-vegans. A lot of Americans are deficient in some of our primary vitamins and minerals, and I'm going to focus on just a couple. So when we think about a plant-based diet, we want to make sure that our vitamin B12 levels are adequate. We want to be thinking about our vitamin D levels, our iron. But if I was to prioritize maybe one or two that you wanted to look at, I'd say make sure, if you add to that tick list of tests that you're ordering, your vitamin B12 level. And vitamin B12 is something that we know most people who are vegan are supplementing with, but those who are non-vegan can also have low vitamin B12 levels. And it's important for many reasons. And then also your vitamin D level. Vitamin D is actually a hormone, not just a vitamin, but it plays an important role in our immune system function, our overall health. And most of us are probably deficient because we're not out in the sunshine, exposed like we used to be or like we could be. And vitamin D would be synthesized through that sun exposure. So knowing if you're low and could benefit from supplementation would also be helpful.
Yeah, I've been regularly supplementing with vitamin B12 for 8 years at least on a regular basis. But vitamin D supplementation is something that I've just introduced pretty recently in the last few months. And that's because I was on the lower side of my levels when I got my blood testing done in January. So yeah, that is important to keep in mind. And generally, I've thought that as long as I'm kind of getting outdoors during the warmer months at least, and getting some adequate sunshine, I don't really need to worry about that. And then maybe at some point I'll just kind of start supplementing with that during the winter. And I think just at the end of the day, you don't know where you're at unless you get blood testing done. So it's really important to make that happen.
And I hadn't realized it either, but it was, when I was working with the Wellness Institute, when I was at Cleveland Clinic, that's where I was actually exposed to the fact that a large majority of us have low vitamin D levels. So we screened just about everyone who came through the program at the time. And I would encourage people, even if you live in California, if you live in Australia, New Zealand, you need to know your number, because assuming that you're getting adequate sun exposure may be an incorrect assumption.
Yeah, and it's such an important vitamin to stay on top of and ensure you're getting adequate levels of. So yeah, I think those are some good recommendations for the micronutrient portion as well. All right, so now you've covered some of the foundational tests that really everyone should be thinking about. Could we do a quick recap on all of those and then maybe talk about some more advanced testing that a healthy, fit vegan who wants some extra credit should get?
We all have extra credit.
Yes.
So just to recap, we talked about a general laboratory assessment. And those general labs were getting your complete blood count, your CBC, your comprehensive metabolic profile, your CMP. Your CBC is your blood cells. Your CMP are your electrolytes, how your kidney's functioning, and then your lipid profile, which is your HDL, your LDL, and then tacking onto that some newer tests, which are your ApoB levels and your lipoprotein little a. The second part was then do I have any vitamin or mineral deficiencies? And there's a whole host of tests that you could run, but in order to prioritize and focus and make sure you're spending your dollars wisely, thinking about your vitamin B12 and your vitamin D levels.
Wonderful. So now let's talk about maybe going one level beyond. What else, if I get all that done and I'm looking for kind of the next thing, what else would you recommend?
So, Leif, that's a good question. And there are many of the labs, Quest, LabCorp, Inside Tracker, they've bundled some of these labs in ways that make logical sense. So a men's health panel, a women's health panel, there are panels that may be specific to if you're experiencing certain symptoms like fatigue, low energy, and you need to explore what may be the root cause. So what is included in some of those bundles are things like a basic assessment of your thyroid function, and we can go into these in detail. It may be an assessment of your hormone level, if indicated. It may also be indicators of, do you have any systemic inflammation? And inflammation is something that we know is at the root cause of many chronic diseases. And so knowing if you are if some of those biomarkers are elevated, may also be a good baseline assessment for a healthy, fit vegan. So starting at the top, head and neck, I might as well go there. Thyroid function is something that usually it's screened as part of an annual physical exam, and your practitioner will order a thyroid stimulating hormone or a TSH level. And that number, whether it's high or low or within normal range, will give you or your healthcare team an indication, is your thyroid working well? And your thyroid is a master gland. It is so important in terms of your metabolic rate. It plays into so many other systems in your body that when it's a little bit off kilter, you may not feel it, but it is something that should be assessed. And I speak from experience in that I have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and for a long time I didn't even realize it, but I'm now on thyroid replacement and doing just fine. But if you don't know, you can't manage it. So thyroid function, screening TSH would be one test. The next in priority, I would probably think of some basic inflammatory markers. Although there are many, I would prioritize a C-reactive protein, a CRP, a high sensitivity C-reactive protein, which is just similar to the CRP, but the test is more specific in order to assess systemic inflammation, and then also a homocysteine level. And homocysteine is another biomarker which, if elevated, has been correlated with a risk of cardiovascular disease. So if you're going to order your labs, you're at Quest, you're at LabCorp, you're at Insight Tracker, some of those may be bundled, but you can also order panels that are specific to understanding if you are inflamed.
Yeah, that's a great overview and a lot of opportunities for earning some extra credit. So appreciate that. So now that we have identified the tests that people should consider getting, what do I do once I get my results? And I've only used Quest, but they have, I imagine, LabCorp and any of these other companies have similar test result pages where it says, hey, you're in the normal range. The normal range is this to this, and you're within that, or you're a little low, you're a little high. So they give you some indication, but what do you actually do with that? You get thrown a bunch of your health data, and then you kind of feel like you need to juggle all of it. So where do you go from there?
What do I do with my data? So a couple of things. If you have ordered your labs through Quest, LabCorp, Insight Tracker, many of those organizations will offer a counseling session. So you can also order an opportunity to have some insight given to you with regard to what does this mean? Because that's really the question. Am I normal, or not just normal, but are there things I can do to optimize? So you may come back completely normal, but you could be low side of normal on some key parameters. And there's opportunity to, through lifestyle, nutrition, exercise, to move yourself up into a more optimal range. So the first thing I would do when I get my lab test back is either talk to your healthcare team, talk to a coach if you have a coach, or if you don't have access to any of those directly, you may be able to go onto that organization's website where they usually have some high-level recommendations with regard to if this is high, if this is low, what you should do. Most of them do want to refer you to someone who knows you better, knows your health history, and can interpret them in the full context of you, because a number alone is hard to manage without either some past medical history, some historical data on is this number, if it's the first time you've had it, that's your baseline. If you've had prior tests and now you're comparing it to a historical value, what does this mean in that context? So seek out the advice of someone who can help you interpret the information.
So maybe now would be a good time to dive into a little bit of my health data and get an expert opinion on how things are going, what I should be considering maybe tweaking moving forward.
Primary takeaway is you are a fit, healthy vegan. But there are areas where you could also improve. So looking at your lipid profile, your cholesterol is great, your HDL is great, your triglycerides are great, your LDL is great. So whatever great advice from Dr. Greg or anyone else that you're following in terms of your nutrition, keep it up. The next set of labs are your kind of a lumping of your micronutrients, and those include your calcium, your iodine, your iron, your B12, your B1 and B6, and your zinc. You had a couple of labs that actually went down between January and March, but I mean, that's just a short period of time, nothing that I would worry about. The only one that we had intervened on was maybe stopping one of the vitamins that you were taking that had B6, because your B6 level was elevated in January. It wasn't repeated on this test. Otherwise, those labs all look good too. Next was your vitamin D. Did you double your vitamin D?
I did a 1.5.
Okay, let's go to 2.
We'll go to 2. I think that's what we decided at the end of the last conversation was we were going to do. I was taking vitamin D and I did a 1.5. So now 2.0. Got to boost my numbers a little bit.
So the normal range for vitamin D is about 30 to 100, and you're running about 37 right now. So still a little on the lower side, but continuing to eat all of the foods that are, that can support good health, taking your vitamin D supplement, and now that you live in a beautiful sunny place, getting outside more.
Yeah.
And then we'll repeat that in a couple of months.
It's hard to know. Like I listen to Brian Johnson pretty closely, and he is just, he's like a self-proclaimed vampire. He talks all the time about avoiding the sun. Is that, I would just love to hear your thoughts. I think it's hard to know exactly. Some healthcare professionals will say, hey, you should aim to get 15 to 30 minutes of sun exposure on your arms and legs during the midday, ideally, depending on your skin color. You hear that, and then other people kind of focus a little bit more on supplementation. I mean, if you are getting outside and you still have low levels, then supplementation obviously is the path forward. But do you have any thoughts on how much sun is too much? Is it better to just supplement? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So I'm not in the Brian Johnson vampire camp. I'm going to answer your question indirectly. I would love for you to get outside 20 to 30 minutes a day to walk. And if during that walk you could get some sun exposure, then I think you're accomplishing 2 things. One, you're moving, which I think is something that is underrated and it needs to be overemphasized. If I am wholeheartedly in favor of putting on your sunscreen. Most people know that when I'm out, I tend to wear long sleeves because I do worry about sun damage for being out in the sun for sustained periods of time. No one wants to get skin cancer. But if you are outside 20, 30 minutes, you're able to get your face, your arms, your legs exposed. You will benefit not only from activating the hormones that can help make vitamin D, but you'll also benefit from just the overall health and wellness that you obtain from being outside in nature and being active.
Yeah, and it's hard to overstate the power of moving outdoors. For me, it's a lot just kind of like stress relief, just a mental reset. It's a good time to I love being in nature and being able to walk amongst trees. It's really valuable time.
And skin cancer is a real concern. So I don't want to minimize the risk. And I know that even when we were little kids, Mom always used to, don't be out in the sun for too long, put on your sunscreen. So that's how I grew up. I'm the same as you. I need to be outside. I just tend to put on your hat, put on your long sleeves. If you're going to be out for an hour or two running, make sure that you're protecting your skin.
Yeah.
And that includes your ears and the back of your neck.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, I just think about all of the times as a kid I would just run around and pretty much never use sunscreen. And then would also live outdoors during the summer. I was always outside, always playing with my friends, always doing stupid stuff outside. So yeah, it's important to get that outside time, but then also make sure that you're being smart about it.
Exactly. Another lab from Leif's lab panel is your hemoglobin A1C, which was stable at 5.1. So that hasn't changed between January and March. And though that kind of aligns with what we were covering in Lab Test 101. A couple other points to this conversation. One, we're not saying that you have to run out and get all these tests done. What we are wanting to do with Lab Test 101 is to give you the information and the tools to understand what you may want to prioritize if you don't already know your numbers. 2, once you know your numbers, understand that you should have a conversation with either your healthcare team or someone who can help you interpret them and understand how to optimize them, whether it's knowing to supplement some additional vitamin D, whether your hemoglobin A1C may be slightly elevated, you're trending toward prediabetes, what can you do? I don't want to overwhelm or cause anxiety for people who get data back and they don't know how to interpret it, but know that once you know, then you can act. And that's to me the value of having these biomarkers in your hands that you can take action.
How frequently should one strive to get these assessments?
Another good question. If I said that depends, would it be waffling?
I think we all understand that all of this depends. Yeah. Everyone is on their own unique health and fitness journey. So just generally speaking, what kind of cadence would you recommend for blood testing?
If you are someone who has undertaken a program to optimize your health, so if you're on a fat loss journey, if you're maybe new to adopting the plant-based lifestyle and have opportunity to improve your labs, you may want to think about, after your baseline, getting them repeated at least 3 to 4 months later. And that'll give you a directional indicator. Am I doing the right things? Some of these values will move sooner. We know from a lot of the studies that have been published, from the Esselstyn's work, from the recent Netflix documentary, you can see changes in like your lipids in as little as 7 to 14 days. But it doesn't mean you have to go out and repeat these tests in 7 to 14 days, because some of them will take time for you to make a meaningful impact if you're modifying your nutrition, if you're modifying your exercise, or making any other meaningful lifestyle intervention, which is why I'm saying 3 to 4 months.
I don't remember in reading any of my blood test results any kind of error margin that they provided. Do you know any information about kind of what error margins we're working with? If I'm a little low, I'm just going to take it at face value. But I guess I'm mostly thinking about the fact that I got testing done in January and then testing done again in March. How, if a value fluctuates a little bit, is that a real change, or could it just be due to maybe some error margin?
I don't know how to answer that question. I don't know.
Probably also depends per test.
So for a lot of the tests, for your lipids, for example, if you had a meaningful change, I would say that is probably real. As long as the test was performed it was fasting, all of the criteria that went into making that an optimal test. A lot of these lab ranges are population ranges. So they're based on aggregated information from lots and lots of people and looking at how normal is defined. So in part, I feel like there's a little bit of a built-in 1 or 2 standard deviations in there already, because we don't want to flag people if they are low or if they are high, when we know that there's some variability even within the population.
Yeah, that's a very good point. When I'm maybe another somewhat challenging question that I don't know the answer to would be, whenever I look at these tests, I look at the normal range and I just say, hey, ideal is in the middle of this normal range. That's kind of how I view it. I would imagine that's how most people probably view it as well. Is it right to think that way? Or if I'm in the normal range and I'm not kind of really towards the low part of the normal range or towards the high part of the normal range, I just say, hey, I'm good?
I think that depends too. So yes, I would say if you have to have a target, try to be in the middle. But for instance, your vitamin D level is technically normal, but you're on the low level. And we know that if you're thinking about optimizing your health, that you have opportunity to move that up toward 40 to 60. So as a rough guide, trying to be in the middle, if you think about it almost like a bell curve, trying to be in the middle is a good place to be, but also knowing that if your goal is to look for where there's opportunity to make impactful change, you want to make sure that you look at each one of those independently and understand what lever can I pull to maybe move myself into even a more optimal range, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does make sense. And that's very helpful. So I guess a few other quick questions. What do you do if your doctor will not order a blood test for you?
So the beautiful thing today is that we have democratized a lot of the access to your health information. It's your data. Going through your physician, if you have a health plan, means that it may be covered by your health insurance. But you can go to a Quest, a LabCorp, an Insight Tracker, many other places, and you can order these labs on your own. Though that will be out of pocket. I don't know if HSA or FSA may cover some of them, but please know that if you are not able, either your physician, your healthcare team won't order it, or you don't have health insurance and you can't order it through your insurance, you can purchase them out of pocket.
Yeah, and that's what I've been doing and works really well, super seamless. You don't need to deal with insurance or your doctor's office.
They can come to your house.
You can go straight there. Makes it really easy. Anything else that you kind of have in mind?
Maybe one last comment, which is, I know we talked about supplementation. My personal bias for any way to optimize your health, lifestyle first. So think about what you're doing with your nutrition. Think about what you're doing with your physical activity. Are you optimizing your sleep, your stress? I mean, all of the things that are in your control should be the first thing you look at as an opportunity to change before you go add in a supplement or look for some, I don't want to say magic pill or potion to help address what 9 times out of 10 nutrition and movement can fix.
That's a really important point. I'm a big believer in not just trying to slap a Band-Aid on an existing issue. Let's focus on really getting your health into more of an optimized state, and then you can start adding these supplementary things on top of that.
Root cause analysis.
Yeah. So I do want to end by some of the blood test thoughts that you shared on a previous call that we had in our Vegan Superhero Academy. One, the first thing you said is there's nothing you can't do, which I think is just an empowering kind of thought to keep in mind. You can change.
You can change
whatever piece of data you would like to change. And it's in your power to do so.
Yes, I want the caveat around that. There are some familial abnormalities that you may be able to impact, you may not be able to completely normalize without intervention such as medication. But the key is that you have the power to make an impact on your numbers.
And you also said never order a lab that you are not willing to be accountable for. You want to expand on that?
So there is a wealth of tests that you can order today. I mean, we touched on just for Lab Test 101, we talked about some core data. You can think about genetic testing. You can think about microbiome testing. You can think about, I mean, if there is a body fluid or a body cavity, you can probably get a test to assess, is it working well or not? But one, what are you going to do with those results? Because some of them could be serious, depending on what you find. And two, if you are someone who may get overwhelmed by information, is it going to help you or is it going to hinder you? So I always like to make sure that whether you're ordering a blood test, whether you're ordering an imaging test, you need to be prepared to receive the information and you need to be prepared to act on the information.
Well said. You also mentioned the fact that you don't want to miss a window of opportunity to turn things around. So I guess we can speak to people who maybe have some anxiety around knowing their numbers. And hey, ignorance is bliss. I'd rather kind of just maybe not know. What would you say to that person?
Oh, you're asking a geek, a data geek. Life is precious. And if you can inform yourself in a way that would allow you to live longer, live healthier, and be with the people you loved longer, it's worth it. And not only for these, I mean, we talked about biomarkers today, but even something as simple as taking your blood pressure. I mean, high blood pressure is a silent killer. And it's something that it impacts so many Americans. You can make a difference in your own health if you know where there's opportunity.
Well said. Well, Daphne, thank you so much for your time. This has been a really cool conversation. I love talking about empowering people through their health and fitness journey, empowering people through knowing your numbers, and really giving everyone the opportunity to get into kind of the best health and shape of their lives. And yeah, just appreciate your time, appreciate your expertise.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks so much for sharing this.
Appreciate it.
All right, if you enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Daphne Bascom, please be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a future conversation. We're going to be sharing a lot more about nutrition, health, fitness, and really working to help you get into the best health and shape of your life. So thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.